Sunlight spilled across rolling hillsides, a golden wash illuminating orderly rows of grapevines stretching toward an endless horizon. Subtle breezes carried the tang of fresh earth and the sweet promise of fruit ripening on the vines. It was early evening, and the sky blushed pink at the edges, quietly permitting the sun to retire above the vines. In the heart of this verdant paradise stood a rustic stone house, its aged walls thick with stories of harvests past. A gentle wisp of smoke curled from the chimney, while in the distance the honeyed notes of late summer orchard blossoms mingled with the heady scent of grapes at the height of their sugar. It was here that Mariette Chazon lived and labored, coaxing life out of vine and soil, producing wines that reflected the nuance and complexity of land and devotion. She had inherited the vineyard some years ago from her grandfather, an old Frenchman who believed that wine was nothing less than bottled memories, formed by the careful nurturing of vines, sealed by time, and opened when the heart was ready. There, among the vines she had grown to love, Mariette learned to listen as the land told its story. She understood how the type of soil, the rainfall, even an unexpected breeze shaped a grape's character and gave each vintage a signature. Her days began with greeting the vines and ended with them, sometimes during harvest season, well after dark. She walked barefoot across rows of neatly tended plants, letting their leaves brush her hair as she gently tested the fruit, singing softly in French. Among a devoted clientele, Mariette's wines were known for their unique bouquets and the intangible warmth they brought to gatherings. It was no surprise when Eustace Grimshaw, a renowned but notoriously cynical food critic, supposedly known for his unsparing columns, sent word ahead of his arrival. News spread like a swirl of dust across the valley. The famed critic, whose reviews were dreaded and sought with equal passion, was making his way to sample Mariette's latest bottles. If she impressed him, he could transform her small, beloved vineyard into the toast of Epicurean society. But if she underwhelmed him, she risked scathing commentary that might overshadow her life's labor. When the day came, a black convertible rattled up to the stone courtyard, old tires skidding slightly on gravel. Out stepped Eustace, tall and narrow-shouldered, in a tailored suit that fit a bit awkwardly in the countryside. He removed elegant sunglasses to reveal slate-gray eyes. His meticulously combed dark hair glistened as though polished. He surveyed the property with an expression that could be described as caution laced with mild disapproval, and Mariette could almost see him crafting mental paragraphs of critique about the rustic aesthetic, the arrangement of creeping vines, perhaps even the swirl of dust settling on his lapels. Nonetheless, she edged forward with a disarming smile. The swirl of pressed linen around her knees, covered with splotches of earth, hinted at her day spent in the vineyard. "Monsieur Grimshaw," she said, holding out her hand, "it's a pleasure to welcome you. I trust your journey was pleasant." Eustace gave a practiced nod, neither warm nor cold, and took her hand in a brisk handshake. "Pleasant enough," he replied. "It's a bit remote out here." His clipped accent betrayed a London upbringing. Then he surveyed the stone edifice. "You must be Mariette." She nodded, her chestnut hair escaping its tie as the breeze teased the wisps around her face. "I'd be delighted to show you around," she said lightly, ignoring his remark. "Shall we begin with the vines? Or perhaps you'd prefer to taste the wine first?" He pulled back the sleeve of his jacket and consulted a delicate watch. "I only have time for a quick tasting. I still need to review a local bistro for tomorrow's issue." Mariette nodded. "Of course. Please follow me to the cellar." She tilted her head toward the back courtyard, where rows of grapes gave a scenic backdrop to the vaulted doors that led down to cool, candlelit hallways. Eustace's footsteps echoed with a measured precision, while Mariette's were soft, almost in harmony with the ambient hum of the countryside. She parted the cellar doors, and a wave of cool air greeted them, along with the pungent fragrance of oak barrels resting like dormant guardians in the dimly lit room. Overhead, stone arches soared, the space illuminated intermittently by sconces that cast dancing shadows across the aged casks. Each cask told a story of a particular harvest. Some barrels were from year-long experiments, others from tried and true varietals her family had perfected over decades. She stopped by a barrel with intricate carvings. "This was my grandfather's masterpiece," she explained softly. "He wanted to express the spirit of the forest, bringing oak and grape together in harmonious union." That's quite poetic. Eustace let his gaze linger on the carving, though his voice held a carefully measured tone. "I trust the taste transcends the artistry on display." Mariette gave him a small smile and pulled out a thin steel instrument for sampling. Beneath the glow of soft light, she extracted a ruby red stream of wine and let it slide into a tall, slender glass. Handing it to Eustace, she stepped back. "Please tell me what you find in it." Eustace sniffed the wine, swirling it deftly before letting it pass his lips. His eyes closed in concentration. Mariette watched as lines of tension furrowed his brow. "Blackberries," he finally remarked, swirling the glass again. "Mulberry, perhaps, and something else." He paused, taking another sip, letting it settle. "A hint of rosemary? No, more subtle. Lavender, maybe." Mariette smiled gently. "My grandfather liked to plant lavender near this batch of vines. He believed in letting nature's orchestra play together. The scents and flavors blend over time." Eustace stood poised to offer a critique, but Mariette could see him struggling not to betray too much admiration. He agreed to taste a few more barrels, each one telling a different story of the land. She watched with quiet satisfaction as his shoulders gradually relaxed. Occasionally, he would make little notes in a small black notebook he carried, scribbling tasting notes, raising an eyebrow now and again, as if he encountered a nuance distinctly unexpected in a place he had presumed modest. After a while, they emerged from the cellar out into the gilded evening light. Music floated through the air, the lazy strumming of a guitar, accompanied by the vineyard workers celebrating the end of another long day. A wooden table was set outside, lined with platters of crusty bread, olives marinated in herbs, local cheeses, and ribbons of prosciutto. Glasses stood ready alongside the first open bottle of Mariette's favorite cuvée. "I thought you said only a short tasting," she teased, gesturing at the table. Eustace resisted a faint smile. "I still have some time," he conceded. Perhaps the day's warmth and the wine had melted a bit of his cynicism. "The local bistro can wait. Let's see what you have for me here." They settled at the table, and as Mariette poured the wine, she leaned in slightly. "I've always found that wine is best enjoyed with company," she said. "It draws people together, weaving connections that might never happen otherwise." Eustace nodded, but there was a guarded wariness in his eyes. "I've seen many a contrived attempt to manufacture ambiance," he said. "Restaurants feed illusions to the gullible. I suppose it's my role to strip away the pretense and tell readers what's rubbish and what's not." Mariette watched him critically evaluate the spread. "That's one way to look at it," she offered. "But sometimes we critics grow used to searching for faults. What if you allowed yourself to taste not just the wine, but the possibility of a moment, unmeasured by cynicism?" He was silent, lifting a slice of bread to his mouth. The crust crackled beneath his teeth, and a faint smile flickered at the corner of his lips. A gentle hush fell as he reached for the wine, swirling a dark red pool in his glass. The shadows stretched across the vineyard, elongated silhouettes reflecting the day's slow retreat. In the hush of that waning light, Eustace took another sip, letting the flavors expand. There was something intangible in the atmosphere, as though the vines themselves sighed with relief to have someone truly appreciate their gifts. A weight shifted inside Eustace. Something about this vineyard, the care Mariette put into her craft, felt genuine and oddly comforting. He found that the typical bristle of his skepticism was diminishing, replaced by curiosity. Mariette's eyes gleamed with kindness and passion, and he realized how seldom he had allowed himself to simply enjoy a moment without mentally composing barbed commentary. Later that evening, as the moon took up silent guard in the sky, Eustace prepared to depart. His pen hovered over the notepad in his hand. Mariette walked him to his car, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. "Thank you," he said softly. "The tasting was enlightening." He paused. "I'll send you a draft of my article." Mariette nodded. "Thank you, Eustace. Perhaps next time we can talk of more than wine." He didn't quite respond, only pursed his lips thoughtfully and slid into the driver's seat, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake as he drove off into the darkness. To her surprise, the next morning, Mariette rose to find a message tacked to her door. Eustace was returning in a week. "Have a new vintage ready," the note read. "I'd like to experience the harvest." She couldn't help but laugh, shaking her head at his curt message. He was an odd one, but if there was a spark of genuine interest behind his demanding exterior, she wanted to nurture it. She hurried out into the vines, letting the workers know they would soon have a peculiar guest. On the appointed day, the same black convertible whispered up to the vineyard, though this time Eustace seemed a touch more informal. He rolled up the sleeves of a crisp linen shirt as he stepped out, instead of wearing the usual suit jacket. "I hear you're at an interesting stage of the harvest," he noted, approaching her with something that almost resembled friendliness. "We are," she replied, beckoning him to follow. "Early mornings are perfect for picking grapes. That's when the natural sugars are at their best. If you'd like, you could join us tomorrow at dawn." He gave a faint wince. "Dawn?" He seemed ready to protest, but glimpsed a playful challenge in her eyes. "Very well. I could sample the experience firsthand." Mariette showed him around the vineyard again, this time focusing on the vines themselves rather than the fruit already turned into wine. She cradled a cluster of grapes, pointing out their coloration, the delicate bloom on the skins, the faint pockets of shadow beneath leaves. "You see, to get great wine, you must first understand the vine. The soil, the weather, the human touch, none of it can be rushed." Though he kept an air of professional detachment, Eustace listened more intently this time, asking about the variables: soil pH, microclimates, and the effect of altitude. She answered patiently, pleased that he was absorbing not just the technicalities, but the spirit behind them. At one point, while she demonstrated how to gently twist grapes off the vine, their fingers brushed, and a crackle of awareness passed between them. He glanced away, clearing his throat, pretending not to notice. Early the next morning, the horizon was still a gray whisper when Maria found Eustace waiting for her near the vine row. He rubbed his eyes, stifling a yawn, yet somehow appeared resolute. The workers were already filling crates with bunches of grapes, meticulously sorting through to ensure only the finest fruit made the cut. A crisp, dewy scent clung to the air, and the sky gradually lightened. "This is quite the operation," he murmured, falling in step beside Mariette as she carried a small wicker basket. "I never realized how much care goes into each bunch," she nodded. "That's the beauty and the challenge of artisanal wine. Everything matters. We can't manipulate nature too much. Instead, we adapt and respect her pace." She held out the basket. "Would you like to try picking?" He hesitated, then reached for the clippers she offered. Slowly, carefully, he chose a cluster of grapes and clipped them, placing them in the basket. Mariette showed him how to look for signs of damage or insect life. The meticulousness with which he reviewed each cluster indicated a thoroughness that she suspected bled into every aspect of his life, even, perhaps, into the guarded way he approached emotions. The day wore on with surprising ease, the sun rising higher, immersing the vineyard in light. Eustace found himself stepping out of his comfort zone, kneeling in the soft soil, participating in harvest songs with the workers, and occasionally stealing glances at Mariette, who radiated a warm glow as she worked. Her cheeks flushed pink in the morning sun, hair escaping again in tendrils around her face. He watched her chat and laugh with the workers, all of them clearly devoted to her, trusting her to protect and celebrate their shared livelihood. During a break, Mariette offered Eustace a small wooden cup of freshly pressed grape juice, the earliest taste of what might become an extraordinary vintage. He sipped it, eyebrows raised at the potent sweetness. "This is delicious," he said, half in awe. "I can taste the future of the wine already, but it's so different at this stage." They lingered, leaning against a timber railing where vines sprawled outward. "Before I took over from my grandfather," she confided, "I wasn't sure I wanted this life. I even left for a time, studying art in the city. But I realized that crafting wine can be an art in itself, to coax something alive from the soil, to shape it, to share it, to let it carry your heart." Eustace was quiet, watching the sunlight play across her features. He thought of how often he had found fault with restaurants, chefs, culinary trends. Maybe in his fervor for truth, he'd missed the heart behind each creation. "I've always valued honesty," he said slowly, "stripping away illusions. But maybe I've lost the ability to see wonder." Mariette smiled. "Critics have an important role, but I believe any creation, food, wine, music, is an opportunity to connect. If you only look for flaws, sometimes you miss those chances." Something inside Eustace shifted a little more. The cynic who had arrived at this vineyard felt a renewed sense of curiosity. The tang of grapes and earth in the air, the hum of bees dancing among wildflowers, and the sincerity in Mariette's voice all made him realize there was beauty in the details he used to dismiss. Here, in the hush of grapevines and the swirl of morning light, he felt a glimmer of tenderness he hadn't recognized before. Over the next few days, Eustace tried cheeses with Mariette, each paired with a different blend. He watched the sunset from the crest of a hill, surrounded by vines that glowed orange in the dying light. They spent hours in the cellar, discussing how each barrel was carefully monitored. Through these moments, they shared more about their lives beyond the vineyard. Eustace recounted the many times he felt manipulated by the restaurant scene, chefs pandering for favor in his reviews, menus constructed more for spectacle than sincerity. Mariette told him about her grandfather's legacy, her own insecurities, and her dream of bridging tradition with innovation. One evening, when the day's work was done, Mariette invited Eustace to a simple dinner at the stone house. The interior was cozy, with a rustic fireplace and shelves crowded with books on antiquated winemaking techniques, local legends, and volumes of poetry. Thick earthenware plates weighed down a table set for two. The main dish was a simple pasta tossed with olive oil, garlic, and fresh herbs from her own garden. A small bowl of black olives glistened with marinade, and a crisp salad featured bright tomatoes, basil, and a drizzling of tangy vinaigrette. Eustace sniffed the air appreciatively. "A modest meal," he said, seating himself across from her, "but it smells divine." She smiled, pouring them each a glass of a lightly chilled white wine. "Dinner doesn't have to be elaborate to be memorable. The company matters as much as the food." He allowed himself a slight chuckle, lifting his glass for a gentle toast. "Well, here's to remembering that good things can be simple." They began to eat, occasionally glancing at one another with sheepish smiles. Conversation flowed easily, touching on favorite poets, shared childhood memories, and the comedic mishaps of harvests past. She told him how she once slipped and fell face first into a crate of grapes, while he confessed to once writing a review so scathing it shut a London restaurant within months, and feeling unsettled about it ever since. In that flicker of candlelight, Eustace realized he cared about this place and the woman who had opened its doors to him. It was strange to allow a bit of softness into his life of edgy critiques, but he felt that this was one time he might set aside the persona he wore so readily. He no longer wanted to see the world through a lens of suspicious analysis alone. He wanted to appreciate the hands that shaped each flavor, the hearts that grew each orchard and vineyard. Over dessert soft goat cheese drizzled with honey, Mariette leaned forward, her gaze earnest. "Will you stay a bit longer? There's still so much to show you." I sense there's more you want to discover. Her invitation, softly spoken, left him momentarily speechless. He toyed with the idea, glancing around at the cozy house, inhaling its comfortable warmth. Would he let himself open up enough to truly experience love and life? Or would he remain the aloof critic, guarded and alone? After a moment, he exhaled slowly. Yes, I'll stay. One morning, not long after his decision to remain, Mariette guided Eustace into a hidden corner of the vineyard. The long grass whispered around them, and the sunlight sifted through tall cypress trees. It was a place where the land sloped into a gentle hollow, and a small pond mirrored the sky above. White ducks glided across the surface, leaving trails like incomprehensible letters upon water. She squeezed his hand lightly, leading him closer to the water's edge. I come here when I need to reflect, she confided, away from the bustle of harvest, away from expectations. Even the vines can be overwhelming sometimes. Here's where I remember why I do all this. Eustace gazed at her, appreciating how her eyes caught the light, turning green flecked with gold. And why do you do it all? A breeze sifted through her hair as she spoke. Because I believe in bringing out beauty. I think each grape holds the promise of happiness, if nurtured properly. It's a chance to let nature's voice sing. She paused, looking up at him. And maybe, just maybe, it helps people connect in a world that wants to keep us distant. He absorbed this, understanding that here, in the hush of the vineyard's secret hideaway, she was revealing a vision that was both personal and universal. Without quite realizing it, he reached for her hand. They stood together, hearts beat in tandem, letting the gentle ambience of water and wind cradle them. For once, Eustace Grimshaw didn't need to label or critique or categorize. He could simply feel the moment. A week later, Eustace's editor called, pressing him for his review. The deadline loomed. He sat in the small study of the stone house, facing a blank page, a swirl of emotions captive behind his pen. Against all odds, he'd found reasons to love this place. Its vines, its people, and most of all, the woman who poured her spirit into each bottle. How could he remain impartial? His career depended on his reviews being honest, uncompromising. But now, he realized honesty wasn't always harsh. It could be filled with genuine admiration. And so, he wrote. He detailed how each glass of Mariette's wine captured the sunlit slopes of the vineyard and the gentle hush of dawn. He wrote about how the early morning harvest was a symphony of human hands and nature's generosity. His words soared with the hope he had discovered, no false praise, but an authentic appreciation for something that had shaken him out of his guarded cynicism. Later that day, he found Mariette kneeling by a row of young vines, tucking compost around their bases. Dirt stained her hands and knees, and strands of hair curled against her face. He approached quietly, noticing the small beads of sweat on her brow, the determined set of her jaw. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. "How's your article coming along?" she asked, voice cautious, knowing how pivotal his words would be. "Finished," he said softly, handing her the pages. "I'd be honored if you read it before I send it off." She wiped her hands on her apron and gently took the papers, scanning them while Eustace waited, heart pounding. Her eyes glossed over words that described the vineyard, praised her artistry, and gave honest critique of a particular vintage that needed more aging. She paused now and then, smiling, reading passages that admitted how her passion had changed him in ways he could never have predicted. When she finished, her cheeks were flushed with emotion. "You captured it," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just the taste of the wine, but the heart of it all. Thank you." He exhaled, relief flooding him. "I wrote the truth as I see it now. Your vineyard taught me to look for the beauty behind the flavors, to strip away cynicism rather than illusions." She rose to her feet, stepping closer. Their gazes locked, the hush of the vines surrounding them, the soles of their shoes sinking gently into the warm earth. "I'm glad," she said, voice laced with sincerity. I'm glad you found something more here. That's the thing, he responded quietly. I don't just want to write about it, I want to live it. She set the papers aside, letting them flutter on a nearby barrel. With her soil streaked hands, she reached up, cupping his cheeks. Stay, she whispered, her eyes brimming with unspoken affection. He leaned into her touch, no longer fighting the desire that had grown between them. Here, in the luminous shade of vines heavy with promise, he closed the distance. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss, as if savoring each other's flavor as they would a rare vintage. The moment made the world around them feel suspended, the hush of nature wrapping them in an embrace that was both tender and exhilarating. When they pulled apart, the walk back to the house was slow, their fingers intertwined. That evening, they celebrated with laughter and an impromptu meal shared with the vineyard workers, who teased them good naturedly. Bottles were opened, toasts made, and in the glow of lantern light dancing against stone walls, Eustace and Mariette found a sense of belonging. Their shared laughter rang out into the night, and the vines seemed to sway in approval. In the weeks that followed, Eustace sent in his review, which sparked glowing interest in Mariette's vineyard. Her phone rang ceaselessly, new distributors eager to strike deals, large buyers offering enviable contracts, but she was careful and selective, refusing to compromise the handcrafted essence of her work. Meanwhile, Eustace found himself savoring each day. The critical edges of his nature weren't absent, but they softened, channeling into thoughtful advice that helped Mariette expand while preserving her authenticity. He realized that constructive critique was valuable. Cynicism was what harmed. One sunny morning, as they worked side by side, Mariette turned to Eustace. Are you happy? She asked, nodding toward the vines gently waving in the breeze. He considered her question. For so long, he had found contentment in penning witty takedowns or meticulously analyzing others' creations. Now, the concept of happiness felt more vivid. It was in the swirl of pollen in the sunlight, in the sweetness of grapes still on the vine. I am, he answered. I'm discovering you can be true to your instincts and still find the light in things. She kissed his cheek, a bright smile illuminating her features. I'm glad to hear it. There's much more to show you, and so many vintages left to make upgrades from the years, again and again. As the seasons turned, the vines shed leaves, the grapes were pressed and stored, and the wait began for the next year's bounty. Eager wine lovers flocked to the vineyard after reading Eustace's rhapsodic review, curious to taste the heartfelt wines lauded in a column that rarely granted such praise. But behind the curiosity and the commercial success, something deeper had taken root. The vineyard was still the refuge where Eustace and Mariette cultivated not only wine, but a fragile, tentative love that grew stronger by the day. In the quiet, vine-laden fields, they strolled hand in hand, discussing oak barrels, meal pairings, and sometimes more intimate dreams for the future, like building a small guest cottage so traveling friends could stay and share in harvest celebrations. Marriott talked of developing limited edition wines whose profits could refurbish local schools and help the community flourish. Busey envisioned writing collections of essays that championed authentic food artisans, lifting their unique visions. Here, among old vines and patient soil, they found the courage to build a shared life. At twilight, they would draw close, leaning against each other as they watched the sun descend behind distant hills, turning the landscape into a tapestry of dusky purples and golds. The fragrance of crushed grapes, ripe figs, and warm bread hung in the air, and if at times Eustace's old habits threatened to resurface, the scowl of the critic, the urge to dissect every detail, Mariette would remind him gently with a soft touch or a knowing look, let love guide you to the hidden sweetness. Meanwhile, the vineyard workers teased them about wedding bells, echoing in the future. Though neither Eustace nor Mariette spoke of it outright, They sometimes caught themselves picturing a celebration among these vines, the same place where their worlds converged. It was an image as luscious as the finest vintage, one that made them both consider that the stories we share, particularly around a table with good wine and open hearts, are what tether us together against life's uncertainty. In time, Eustace would leave periodically to fulfill professional obligations, reviewing restaurants in neighboring towns, but he always returned. The stone house where Marriott lived became as much his sanctuary now, a place he could slip fully into the tapestry of warmth and labor. Instead of seeking the illusions he used to expose, he searched for the authenticity within each chef's dish, each vintner's barrel, each orchard's fruit. He wrote with a new sense of purpose, praising those who poured genuine care into their creations. If something fell short, his words challenged them to grow rather than to despair. For something to critics could also be nurturers. And so, under the sapphire sky, Eustace and Mariette nurtured their blossoming romance as carefully as they tended the vines. Each new day brought them closer, forging a bond as intricate as the flavors they coaxed from the earth. For in discovering the sweetness at the heart of one another, they had somehow found a vintage that would endure, a promise that love can be discovered even by those who have trained themselves to see the worst. A vintage of hope that renewed itself with each dawn's first light. In lingering sunsets, with wine glasses reflecting the sky's gentle fire, they would epitomize the idea that true flavor in life comes not only from carefully guarded passion, but also from the willingness to risk vulnerability. Between them, there blossomed a trust that allowed even the harshest critic to taste the sweet notes that love had to offer. Drinking in every breath, every laugh, every shared moment, as if they were sampling a rare, once in a lifetime vintage, and it was enough to transform them both, reminding each other that every harvest in life can yield something precious when tended with care, devotion, and just a little faith in the unexpected.